Hi, my name is Magda Zagay with SASH, and I am here with Richard and Lori to talk about their Sex by interviews and learn more about their upcoming presentation in October, I Talk Sexual Health Conference. How are you both doing today?
Doing great.
Doing well, thanks, Magda.
Perfect. Now, would you guys tell us who inspired you to start this work?
I think for me, it was just the clients who kept walking in the door seeking help. And then when I really got to working with the betrayed partners, that was what was so inspirational to me. It was just seeing them do the hard work and seeing them get well. How about you, Lori?
I agree, Richard. It is so inspiring to know that being able to walk with people in this much pain and being present in that really compels me to keep doing this really hard work.
Oh, that's amazing. Who inspires you now?
I would say for me, it has been the resiliency of the betrayed partners, just seeing what they go through and how they bounce back. It's a lot of hard work, but I'll tell you, the betrayed partners, the people who struggle with PSBs, they're really underneath all the trauma. They're some of the most amazing people you'd ever meet in your life. And I find them very inspirational.
And, I'd have to say that the way that Richard has working with Richard in the last few years and seeing how gentle and how just how understanding he is with the partners I've been really trying to emulate that. So it'd be Richard for me.
Oh, that's amazing.
Thank you. I wasn't expecting that.
Oh, so what's the one thing you wish you knew before you started out as a clinical?
Yeah, for me, I guess it would be, I wish I had known or understood maybe the depth of some of the painful experiences I would be encountering. When I started off almost 30 years ago, I was not ready for that. And so I had to learn to adapt quite a bit. And I'm grateful I took that journey. And I wish I had just had a better grasp of it at the time.
Yeah. I think that I wish I kind of appreciated that someone being really heard and understood as the first step, and to try not to move off of that too quickly. That really is the very beginning of being able to make any kind of movement or progress in helping reduce their trauma symptoms.
Okay. Is there any advice you would like to give for new professionals?
I would say you get good supervision, surround yourself with people who believe in you and who are willing to mentor you and get you through some of the tough times. So many jobs that are out there, people learn them in the first few weeks, maybe 6 months, and then they've kind of, topped out, so to speak. But in this field, you're going to work at least 2 years before you run the gamut of the DSM and you see things. And so you're always seeing something new those first few years. And so I would just say, don't get discouraged. Keep trying, keep working with a good support network.
Well, I would agree with Richard. I think not doing this work alone, it's really hard, and it's very trying. I know that we have a team at Capstone that we do this work together, and we get different perspectives. I've had great clinical supervision here, and also just the consultation and the working with the colleagues together as a team has been so important to doing good work.
I agree with Lori. I think that team concept is so critical. This is not a profession to be a lone wolf in, and it is important to stay connected to a supportive community.
Mhm.
So when do you know it's time to adapt?
Constantly. I don't think there is a time you don't have to be able to adapt. There's always a nuance or a new presentation of something
Mhm.
that is walking in the door. And so the ability to adapt to me is a fundamental part of being able to do the work of a therapist.
Mhm. And I think that really there's a lot of nonverbal cues that give us indications that it may be, you may have to go back to validation, you may need to go back to just reflective listening. If you're feeling some resistance in what you're saying, just to be very, very aware of not necessarily what they're saying, but what you're seeing in their body language gives you a lot of good clues in that arena.
What is the one thing or tip you would use or tip you use as a student that you continue to use?
One thing my first clinical supervisor taught me in my internship, and I had two fantastic clinical supervisors, was he said, you have what it takes. You just don't have the speed yet. You may not access it as quickly, but he said, keep asking questions. You can always seek help outside of the session and come back. And as long as that client knows that you are with them, you are present with them 100% of the way, and that you are sold out for doing what is in their best interest, you'll be able to overcome any technical mistakes and find the resources that you need. And so things do come a lot quicker for me, almost 30 years later, but starting off, I think it's one of those things it was a very important lesson he taught me.
Yeah. And I think always remaining curious. I think when you're in school, there's this sometimes explicit, sometimes implicit message that you get that you need to come up with the right answer, because that's kind of what school's about. And understanding that always wondering, always exploring, and keeping that curiosity is so much better of a position than coming up with the right answer, the right diagnosis.
I think one thing I would add to that, and also to the previous question about what do I wish I'd known as a student, is that there's a big difference between what happens in a classroom and what happens in the real world. And even though internships help some with that, it's so important to have good mentoring, good supervision along the way, because there is a lot of work to do between bridging the gap between your academic experience and what happens when you're sitting with a client, especially a betrayed partner.
Why is your presentation important to sexual health?
Well, we're working in our presentation to help overcome some of the obstacles that I think people run into, and anything we can do to help clinicians work with their couples, bringing people together in authentic ways with good knowledge, good education, and also a lot of compassion. I think that in and of itself will be a big improvement to sexual health.
And I think so much that with the work that we do is an interruption of what healthy sexuality is. There's almost invariably, there are unhealthy sexual experiences that our clients have very early on, and it really interrupts the healthy sexuality, healthy sexual development that people need in order be able to really enjoy that part of their lives.
To one of the things I did early on, I spent some time doing surveys in men's aftercare groups, men's sex addiction groups, back when we were calling them sex addiction. And one of the questions was, what kinds of trauma have you experienced? And it had a bunch of things they could check off and another. The number one answer by far and away from over 100 men was, no one ever taught me about sex.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if your only sex education came from pornography and you never had good, healthy sex education, how do you have a healthy sexuality? How do you have a healthy sex life?
Mm-hmm.
And so overcoming some things like that is part of what I think we'll be able to help with in this presentation, and hopefully help give some tools to clinicians to help their clients have healthier sexuality.
Wow. Okay. Why do you think the topic of your presentation is important to talk about? I know you just talked about it a little more, but can we like dive in a little more deeper?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that. One of the difficult things that Lori and I experience is when we get clients who have experienced what we call treatment-induced trauma from other therapists.
Mm-hmm.
And we every week we have a story from usually a betrayed partner, sometimes a man with problematic sexual behavior or a lady with problematic sexual behavior, and they have been hurt by a therapist who was ill-informed or was perhaps using an outdated treatment model, and ended up wounding the partner. And I could write a book on the horror stories I have seen. And there are so many nuances to doing couples work that it's not for the faint-hearted.
Mm-hmm.
And the more tools we can provide for that, I think the better off we all are.
Yes, and just to add to that, it is true that, and I think the heart of most clinicians is to be helpful, and it's just a lack of understanding, a lack of knowledge, as Richard said, outdated information where people try to jump in, therapists try to jump in too quickly into a stage of change when they don't feel validated, they don't feel understood or heard. Their pain has not been honored enough, that then they feel like they have responsibility where they don't have responsibility. And so if clinicians really do want to do this type of work, they need to be able to they need to seek good training in this area.
I would say I had a psychiatrist when I was a little kid, and I don't think she knew what she was doing, honestly. So I had to like step back from her, and I did not know it actually like challenged me mentally. And I was telling my mom, like, I don't think she is right for me. But again, like once COVID started, I had to go back. And she was like, well, I'm from Ethiopia. So like she was like one of the best there. And we just did not see eye to eye. So I was like, yeah, she always like, also, she didn't understand like that she has to be there for me as much as like I have to be there to open up.
Mm-hmm.
So she would always flake on me, especially after I moved back to the States, like stop calling me, like stop answering my calls. And my mom had paid her like in advance. So like my mom doesn't have to go back and forth every weekend. And she just disappeared, like gone. So I have not been able to like reach out to a new therapist or even brought myself to talk to a new one because I'm, terrified. I'm scared that I'm going to open up again to someone and then they're just going to leave.
That's the very type of treatment-induced trauma that we're talking about. And yeah, there are a lot of good therapists out there who are not trained in the areas of betrayal and problematic sexual behavior as a specialty. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that the individual isn't a good therapist. It may be they're just not a specialist and they need to seek specialty training. And otherwise, we have stories like the one you just shared with us. And honestly, it makes me embarrassed for the profession that someone treated you that way.
And just the barriers that it could create to you getting the help that you need. I'm really sorry to hear about that, Magda.
I mean, it's okay. I feel like I've grown to like take care of myself because that person wasn't there for me as much as I needed them to be there for me. Yeah, but that being said, when you created this presentation, what type of client were you thinking about?
I was thinking about couples who, perhaps had encountered barriers in past treatment and needed help overcoming that. I'm thinking about the importance of treating both the person with PSB and betrayal trauma with care and sensitivity, and valuing each of them equally. That was one of the big problems early on with treatment models, was it valued the person with PSB, but the partners were almost an afterthought. And that's one of the things that has made us unique at Capstone, is we value every member of the family equally.
Yes, and I work with mostly partners, and I'll encounter the partner with the problematic sexual behavior less frequently, sometimes in a therapeutic disclosure. But I also have to be able to advocate for my client, usually the betrayed partner, and still do my best to avoid a shaming posture towards the one, usually the one acting out in the relationship. And that's a difficult balance to strike sometimes.
So what would you say about like what changed this topic? Like what's new?
Honestly, I wish there was a lot more new, but sadly, we continue to see the same old abuses that take place based on old treatment models. I wish that I think that what we have seen change for the better is people have a better understanding of when to start couples work and when not to. One of the things, for example, that we emphasize when Lori and I are both working with a couple is we might look at having a couples piece in place early on, but that doesn't mean we're doing in-depth couples therapy. And one of the things that I think is so critical is being able to time that to really understand the needs of both partners and figure out when to go deeper, when to bring that together. And I think we're learning a lot more about that. And hopefully, what we do in our presentation can make a small contribution to helping make things better.
I think also just all the new information that's coming out, the brain-based information about what's going on inside the brain when there is trauma, how the amygdala is very activated, which means your prefrontal cortex is offline. So that decision making, that executive functioning, that negotiations, all of those higher brain function is just not accessible when you feel under threat. And so managing your expectation, trying to take that time to calm down that fight or flight response, fight, freeze, yada, yada, yada. All those limbic system responses before you can really engage in that couples piece is really, I think, new to the conversation.
Please give me one practical takeaway for the attendees.
One that I hope they'll take away is identifying specific things that can cause couples problems in the therapy process, and provide antidotes that can correct that, and hopefully, just some better ways to address some of those misunderstandings, misconceptions.
Yeah, and I think just having a lot of compassion for both partners, that it's a difficult process. It for someone who has been engaging in the problematic sexual behavior, unless you've got somebody with severe personality disorders, there's a lot of shame. There's so many things that they're struggling with. And then the partners are the injured party, and their pain is usually on full display. Having compassion for both partners is really, really important to being able to be with them, and to getting to helping them feel safe so that they can do the hard work of changing relational dynamics and looking deeper into themselves for the source of their pain.
Wow. Well, thank you guys so much. This has been amazing.
Hmm.
And you guys definitely did help me with my nerves. It was not at all.
Oh, good. Well, thanks for having us.
So I appreciate it.